Like It or Not starts now.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to Like It or Not, where we're free to tell the truth and not care who doesn't like it. I am your one and only host for today. Rebecca Zora is not here today, and DJ Exclusive is out celebrating his birthday. Happy birthday to you, big brother. We love you and appreciate you. Hope you're celebrating and enjoying yourself down at the Magic Kingdom and whatnot. Shout out to Rebecca Zora, who could not make it today. The show's not the same without them, but we still have a show to do. Special thanks to David in the background making this happen. We have a lot of miles to cover, a lot of issues that we have to dig into. This is going to be a pretty meaty episode. We have to begin in the state of Texas, where Attorney General Ken Paxton is making it clear that he has every intention of making this young woman who is attempting to have a life-saving procedure to save her life from the difficulty of her pregnancy. Now, I don't talk a lot about reproductive rights on the show. We did cover in great detail the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the effect that we knew that would have on Roe versus Wade. And we do recognize the need for Roe versus Wade and the right to privacy, such that this mother, and we'll play a clip for you in a moment, she should have the right to have this procedure done within the confines of the private conversations she has with her doctor. And this is what has been infringed upon by religious zealots all over this country, who are more interested in their particular dogma than they are the safety and the well-being of women. And in this case, it's the safety and well-being that stops at the life of the child. Right. We do understand very clearly that most of these advocates who claim to be pro-life, they are only pro-life. They're really just pro-birth. They don't have any compassion or any systems or anything in place to actually take care of children after they are born. And so with that in mind, let's pause and listen to Kate Cox as she describes her ordeal as interviewed by MSNBC.
Through this, I never imagined that we would be in this position. You know, I've said I never thought I would ever need or want an abortion. I always wanted a big family. I think forcing me to continue the pregnancy and the pain and suffering put me through the risks of continuing the pregnancy, the risks of childbirth again, especially given how my last two went. I think it's cruel.
Ken Paxton, a man who we can talk about at length another night, is threatening in writing to prosecute any hospital that performs an abortion on this woman. Today, Paxton asked the Texas Supreme Court to intervene. A woman already a mother, pregnant with a wanted child, dealing with a terrible and frightening prognosis, has the Republican Attorney General and Republican activists in Texas overriding the advice of her doctor.
That's the part.
Texas's anti-abortion law is already being challenged in court by 20 Texas women who say the state ban puts their lives in danger by denying them medically necessary abortions. This is the post-Roe world created by Republicans.
That's right.
Voters have repeatedly shown they do not want these.
That is the main part right there, right? The fact that women's lives are in danger because of political ideology and religious zealotry. There really is no clearer picture of where we're headed as a country than a Republican attorney general targeting an individual, threatening doctors, preventing them from giving her life-saving care, all in the name of what? Protecting the lives of children? When we live in the society that these are the same people who insist on sending your children to school without masks, right? I want us to look at the full hypocrisy here. These are the same people who tell us to turn away and don't look at the devastation that's happening to the children in Palestine and Gaza, right? These are the same people who are okay with the idea of school lunch debt, where children can't eat at school because they have school lunch debt. And so it really doesn't it doesn't resonate with me when I hear them say that they're doing this on behalf of children, when everything else that we see them doing in reality is detrimental to children. And in this specific case, Kate Cox is facing the possibility of her own life being lost. And here's the worst part about this, or maybe not the worst part, but it's an insult to injury, is that across social media, people are demanding that she tells everyone her prognosis. What is so bad about her situation that she has to get an abortion? And not only does that violate her privacy, you know, her constitutional right to privacy, not only is that a violation of her HIPAA laws, like forcing her to say that, it really just shows you the level of bad faith that we're engaged in, where people would rather prosecute her in the court of public opinion as to whether her condition is actually bad enough versus taking the advice of her doctor, who has already said her condition is bad enough. This is truly the nature of where we are in America. And David, right here, I want to shift because I want to juxtapose this with a clip from Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson, who last week compared himself to the prophet Moses. And the reason I want to bring this up here is because you need to be able to see the direct line between the type of legislation that is being enforced around this country, like the Texas abortion ban, the type of behavior that's coming from Republican leaders like Republican Attorney General Ken Paxton in Texas, who's targeting this young woman, Kate Cox, and preventing her from getting life-saving care as prescribed by her doctor. I need you to draw the direct line from that type of behavior and the mindset of religious zealots who believe that they are here to do exactly what you just saw being done to Kate Cox. They are here. They believe that they are called by God to implement their very specific type of Christianity with the force of law, as best evidenced by Ken Paxton threatening to sue and imprison doctors who perform this procedure. So listen to this clip. This was just this week where Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who is perhaps the highest, no, not perhaps, most certainly the highest ranking Christian nationalist in this country on the face of the planet, the most powerful Christian nationalist out there. I want you to just take into consideration the depth of thinking and conviction that goes into believing that you are called to be Moses. Take a listen to it. Okay. There's an audio issue with, okay. So now this is interesting because David, this is the same audio issue I had with the podcast yesterday. So the audio is there, but apparently there's an issue with it in terms of being able to be heard. So I don't know if you could do anything about that particular audio, David, but I want to continue the thought and we'll insert the audio afterwards for the radio audience. He essentially just compared himself to Moses, saying that in this process of becoming the Speaker of the House, where he thought that he wasn't going to be so important, he thought first that he was going to be a secondary guy, that he was going to be the backup to whoever the next Moses is. He said that he believed that God called him and the Republican Party to bring forth a new Moses to lead America through what he called a Red Sea moment, a Red Sea moment. And in that Red Sea moment, he believes that the conservative movement in this country, Christian nationalism, has been called to do something revolutionary on behalf of their very specific doctrine and their very specific gospel. He is the Speaker of the House, third in line to the presidency. In the line of succession, there is the vice president, and then there's the Speaker of the House. And so we are in the position where the highest ranking official that we've seen in our lifetime carry the mantle of Christian nationalism to such heights and have the ability to implement, to usher in policies that are even worse than what we see in the state of Texas. But he also has the ability to block policies that are beneficial to humanity, and to do so all in the name of his very specific interpretation of Christianity. This is the problem that we're facing. And I need you to draw the line between the federal level where this is happening and on the state level where this is happening and on the local level where this is happening. It's happening right now at your school boards, all across the country. It's happening right now at your city hall meetings all across the country. There's an inordinate amount of pressure that's being placed on city leaders, on state leaders, and on the federal level from this Christian nationalist movement to install their policies and their beliefs with the force of law, right? That's the thing that's the most terrifying about this, is that they're not satisfied with espousing their beliefs in public, right? Because, okay, fine. You believe what you believe, and you have the right to believe that based on the Constitution. But what you don't have the right to do is to twist the Constitution, and to twist our judicial system, and to twist our executive branch, and to twist our legislative branch into enforcing your specific type of Christianity on America with the force of law. Now, I want to spread this out a little bit further, because it's not only happening in the United States. It is a form of ethnic and religious nationalism that is spreading all over the globe. We see it in the likes of Vladimir Putin and his Orthodox Christianity underneath the leadership of Patriarch Kirill, I believe is the name. We see it with Modi in Israel. In India. We see it with their particular brand of Hindu nationalism. We've seen it for years with far right-wing religious nationalism in form of Islamic nationalism. We've seen it across the country, around the world. But what we haven't seen is what's happening right now, which is an alliance being formed. It has the appearance of diversity. It has the appearance of something along the lines of the League of Nations, right? Where you have independent nations who all lean towards ethno-nationalism, who all lean towards religious nationalism. You see them joining forces around the globe in lockstep with Republicans here in the United States of America. This is why you have American Republicans going and visiting with Erdogan and visiting with far-right extremists across the globe, in consultation with Marie Le Pen out of France, in consultation with Modi, in consultation with this far-right-wing extremism that is taking root all around the globe. You see it rooted here in the United States of America, and there is a direct line to the Speaker of the House. There is a direct line to state leaders like Ken Paxton. This is a well-coordinated and a well-thought-out attempt to restructure the United States of America completely and totally away from democracy and towards something like a theocratic fascist state. That's a lot of words to say that we are honestly and genuinely dealing with a shift towards something more like Handmaid's Tale than we ever could imagine. There's no question about it. We've been tracking it for a very long time. There's specialists who have been tracking it for at least the last 2 years. We've been crying about it and telling everybody, crying out about it and telling people about it for at least the last 2 years, pointing people to the fact that there's a very real threat that is alive and well inside of our institutions. This is how you have Senator Tommy Tuberville out of Alabama, who's able to obstruct the entire military with his particular interpretation of a woman's right to choose, right? The entire block is just happening in the Senate, where there's no officials who are able to be promoted. The chain of command in the military is severely broken down because of all of the blockages that have been placed, the filibusters that have been put in place by Senator Tommy Tuberville out of Alabama. He is directly tied to this Christian nationalism that wants to use the force of law to punish everyone they don't agree with. And so we need to start seeing these things holistically in the bigger framework of what's happening on the global stage. On the global stage, we have religious zealots, extremists of every religion. Okay, I want to be clear, of every religion, who are pushing their governments towards either ethno-nationalism or religious nationalism, either a nationalism that's based on your ethnicity and your ethnicity alone, or your nationalism that's based on your religion. Just swap out the religions. That's all. Swap out the ethnicities, right? Swap out the nations. But in every single country, we see powerful people maneuvering themselves into position to execute religious extremism through the force of law. And this is exactly what we see happening in Texas. All right. let's take a quick break. I want to reset and double check on a couple of pieces of audio here that before we move on and move forward. When we come back, I have to absolutely deal with this madness that's going on in Gaza. I absolutely have to deal with the fact that the United States of America is so in lock and in bed with Benjamin Netanyahu that it is now being considered by the International Criminal Court to investigate them around genocide, expressly because of the United Nations veto that took place yesterday. The United States vetoed a call for a ceasefire. We'll talk about all that in a moment when we get back. We'll be back with more of Like It or Not right after this break.
All right, y'all, make sure that you stay tuned. More Like It or Not is coming up next. But before we get to this next break, what do you call a French guy being mauled by a lion? What do you call a French guy being mauled by a lion? Claude. More Like It or Not coming up next, y'all. Stay tuned.
Where the rhythm meets power.
That song just reminds me how old I am, to be honest with you. The fact that that song is like makes me want to dance reminds me that it's as old as I am almost. Like it's welcome back, folks, to Like It or Not, where we're free to tell the truth and not care who doesn't like it. Rebecca Azor is out this morning. DJ Exclusive is out celebrating his birthday, and so you're stuck with me. Now, here's one of the problems when you have me by myself. I'm not as funny. I'm just hands down. I don't process laughter and joy when I'm by myself, like I do when I'm with my people, when I'm with my friends, my squad, Rebecca and James. They bring out the joy in me, especially when we consider the type of stories that we have to cover, right? The stuff that we talk about, especially this next story. It brings out, I'm not going to say the worst in me. I think it brings out the best in me. But when you consider the genocide that's happening, see, that's what I'm talking about. Like, we have to go right into some heavy stuff, and the stuff that we have to talk about really does deserve all the anger that we can muster. It deserves all of the organizing and attention that we can give it. You cannot sit back and see what's happening in Gaza right now and consider it to be anything else other than a genocide. I have a clip that we'll play in a moment of two good friends in this independent media space, Emma Vigeland and, oh my goodness, Francesca. Woo! And I can never pronounce her last name in the first place, so I'm not even going to try it now, right? But Francesca from the Bituation podcast, they really discuss very frankly the seriousness and the true nature of this genocide that's happening in Gaza. It deserves our anger. It deserves our outrage. Because when we consider what's being done with U.S. taxpayer dollars, and we consider just the extent to which the United States is on the wrong side of the moral arc of the universe yet again, right? And we have no other choice. The only thing that we can do is to voice our dissent and to voice our anger about what's going on. And what's funny to me, in a very dark and twisted way, is that that's exactly what a lot of people are trying to prevent. They're trying to prevent our conviction from being conveyed. They don't want us to show our disappointment, our anger, and our outrage at what's being done in the name of the United States. They don't want to show our emotional reaction to children being killed. Some 10,000 children, babies, have been killed. They don't want us to show that, because if we show that, it humanizes the victims. It puts a real face and a real level of empathy and compassion towards these victims, that if the world feels that compassion, well, then the International Criminal Court will most certainly continue their investigation into people like Benjamin Netanyahu, who in this next clip shows very clearly that he believes that he's doing nothing wrong in Gaza. Don't believe your eyes. Don't believe the bodies that are being put in mass graves. Don't believe the children who are being crushed, the children whose body parts are being splayed all over the streets. No, don't believe that, because he's telling you that this is fake news. Let's listen to Benjamin Netanyahu as he responds to the International Criminal Court proceeding to investigate Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu for war crimes.
First, it outrageous fake when the ICC investigates Israel for fake war crimes. This is pure anti-Semitism. The court established to prevent atrocities like the Nazi Holocaust against the Jewish people, is now targeting the one state of the Jewish people. First, it outrageously claims that when Jews live in our homeland, this is a war crime. Second, it claims that when democratic Israel defends itself against terrorists who murder our children, rocket our cities, we're committing another war crime. Yet the ICC refuses to investigate brutal dictatorships like Iran and Syria, who commit horrific atrocities almost daily. As Prime Minister of Israel, I assure you, we will fight this perversion of justice with all our might.
They're going to fight this perversion of justice with all their might. Now, yesterday in the podcast, I broke down all of the many fallacies that he used for this piece of propaganda. Right. Let's just be clear. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's making every excuse that he can to make sure that they can continue the war crimes. That's what this is about, because the critical thing is happening right now. Right. This is not a conversation for us to have in 2 years in retrospect. Because if Benjamin Netanyahu is allowed to continue his barbarity, we will see the wholesale ethnic cleansing of Palestinian people out of Gaza, both northern Gaza as well as southern Gaza, which we shouldn't even make that distinction. We should not even give them that room to distinguish between northern Gaza and southern Gaza. That's their distinction. That's Israel's IDF's distinction in order for them to be able to start the invasion in two different spots, right? In a sequential order. But here we are with Benjamin Netanyahu making all the excuses that he can. He's pointing towards to Iran. He's pointing towards all these other nations that perhaps have, no doubt, their own war crimes. But that's a whataboutism. I think the formal way of saying it is a to quoque, right? This is to point the attention towards something else so that we will not pay attention to what you're doing, Benjamin Netanyahu. The fact that we have nearly 10,000 children who have been killed. We have more civilians and women. We have doctors who are being targeted. We have scholars who are being targeted. Universities are being leveled. Hospitals are being leveled. The entire communities have been devastated, leveled to the ground. And then we saw a recent image of the Israeli flag being put centered in the town center where they had already committed so much atrocity and violence. The city was leveled, but right there in the center of town was the Israeli flag. This is extremely disturbing because the efforts that are being put in place right now are efforts to keep us quiet as they continue this genocide, right? The calls for ceasefire, an attempt to keep the violence from continuing, that was shot down last week. That was shot down by the United States as a sole objector to a ceasefire. We have a clip of it, and I want you to see exactly how dismissive our ambassador to the UN was when we were simply considering, and when I say we, I mean the world was simply considering, can we have a ceasefire for humanitarian aid? And this is how the representative to the United Nations from the United States behaved.
Support calls for an immediate ceasefire. This would only plant the seeds for the next war, because Hamas has no desire to see a durable peace, to see a two-state solution.
He says because Hamas desire. I want you to notice the game that's done right there. He doesn't speak about the Palestinian people. He speaks about Hamas. He doesn't speak about the context that people are crying for a ceasefire. It's to stop the murder of civilians. He speaks only about Hamas. That's intentional. That's intentional because it is necessary for the United States and for Israel to continue to dehumanize the Palestinian people so that they continue to get away with the ethnic cleansing that is happening in real time, so that they can continue to get away with the war crimes that are happening in real time. Okay. All right. Thank you, David. We'll get to that in 1 second. I want to just do one other thing real quickly. I want to show you the power of something. I don't know. I don't know what I want to call it the power of, but I want to do real-time demonstration of what I shared in episode 2 episodes ago on the podcast. And I want you to go check it out. It's the level to which I have seen artificial intelligence block information on the war crimes that are happening in Gaza right now. I'm not 100% sure how it's going to play out. What I do know is that, well, I can show you better than I can tell you. Let me start with a new chat. You can see on your screen, I'm at bard.google.com. And I wanted to ask Google, first I want to ask it, can you scan the web and find evidence of Vladimir Putin's war crimes in Ukraine? And I want you to see, very easily, very simply put, it starts to share detailed information based on what it was able to pull from Google. And I want to play it for you on the listening audience. As soon as it begins to populate, I want you to listen to how simple it makes the case.
Evidence of Vladimir Putin's war crimes in Ukraine. There is a growing body of evidence that suggests Vladimir Putin and his regime have committed war crimes during the invasion of Ukraine. Here are some of the key pieces of evidence. Direct attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure. Bucha massacre. In April 2022, evidence emerged of the massacre of hundreds of civilians in Bucha, a town near Kyiv, after Russian forces withdrew. The bodies of civilians were found scattered in the streets, with some showing signs of torture. Mariupol theater bombing. In March 2022, a Russian airstrike destroyed a theater in Mariupol that was sheltering hundreds of civilians. The word, children, was clearly written in large letters on the ground outside the theater, but the attack went ahead regardless.
All right, there's much more to it, but as you can see, it has no problem finding and scanning Google for evidence of war crimes against Vladimir Putin. Now, here's the question. I'm going to paste the same question again, and I'm going to swap out Vladimir Putin, and I'm going to put in Benjamin Netanyahu in Gaza. And I want you to see in real time what it decides to tell me. Can you scan the web to find evidence of Benjamin Netanyahu war crimes? Hang on, I want to be very specific. Of war crimes by Benjamin Netanyahu in Gaza, and let's see what it says. Listen very closely.
The conflict in Israel and Gaza is complex and changing rapidly. If you'd like up-to-date information, try using Google search.
Except the problem is, everybody, is that this is Google Bard. This is their AI system. And one of the features is that it is able to search Google in real time to give you real evidence. And so where it was able to do so for Vladimir Putin, it's not able to do so investigating Benjamin Netanyahu or Israel for their war crimes. Now, this is a very brief version. I don't want to, you can take the screen share down because we only have a few more minutes to go in the live show. And I want to make sure that you understand that we've done a thorough investigation into this. You can go and get our most recent episode, our 2 episodes ago on the Benjamin Dixon Show podcast, where we fleshed this out instance by instance. We did a very methodical approach to demonstrating that in the case of my usage of Bard, like go to Google Bard for yourself. Right? Go for yourself and see if it happens to you. But for me, you can see very clearly that when I try to get information from Google Bard with regard to the war crimes or even the alleged war crimes of Benjamin Netanyahu, as he is being investigated by the International Criminal Court, he has been documented by Amnesty International. And this is a part of the investigation. We shared an article from Amnesty International with the AI showing evidence of war crimes. And what did it do? It said, go to Google, search Google. But you are Google. And you did the exact same thing. You searched and found war crimes against Vladimir Putin, evidence of war crimes against Bashar al-Assad. This is the reality of where we are with regard to the dehumanization of the people of Gaza. It is so thorough, it is so complete that you can find evidence of war crimes for other nations on Google Bard and Google's AI, but you cannot find evidence for Palestine, for Benjamin Netanyahu and his actions in Gaza. All right, I want to shift gears one more time before we get ready to get out of here. Again, I want to remind you, you can get that full investigation going to patreon.com/the BPD show, or catching two episodes ago. I did a full fleshing out of this issue. It's from Monday's episode of this week. You can go and find our investigation into Google Bard and their alleged blocking of war crimes from Benjamin Netanyahu committed against the people of Gaza. And again, that was just a very brief presentation in real time, but I want you to go investigate it for yourself, as well as go and get the episode so that you can see how we did it. I want to go back now to Mike Johnson, because one thing I need to tie together is I need everyone to know and understand that what Israel is doing is against America's best interest. But what Israel is doing is also tied very deeply to this ethno-nationalist, religious nationalism that's spreading the globe. And we can see that intersection here in the United States of America, particularly with the evangelicals, white evangelicals to be specific, and Christian nationalists like Mike Johnson, who have a firm belief that their support of Israel in this matter is reflective of their faith. They believe that it is their Christian duty to stand behind the government of Israel, not the Jewish people, but the government of Israel. And I want to go back to this speech where he compared himself to Moses. We have the audio fixed now. And I want to make sure that you hear two things. Number one, the level of megalomania that has to be associated with going out here and telling the world you think that God has called you to be Moses and to lead the nation through a Red Sea moment. That's number one. But number two, just take into consideration just how far Christian nationalism has risen in this country and how dangerous of a time that we are in right now. Let's take a listen to Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Again. Oh, okay. All right. Still audio problem. It's interesting. This is one piece of audio that doesn't want to be heard. No matter where I go, this piece of audio doesn't want to be heard. We'll have to circle back and put it in post, David. Yeah, we'll do it that way because I think it's important for people to hear his voice for himself. And matter of fact, I'm quite sure anyone who follows politics at this point, you've heard that clip and you should listen to it. You can go to Right Wing Watch on Twitter, at Right Wing Watch on Twitter, and get the full clip. But I just want you to really absorb the times that we are in. We are in a specifically dangerous time where religious zealots of every religion, ethnic bigots, right? Like ethnocentric bigots who prioritize their own ethnicity over the minority groups in their nation. And that phrase is very specific. And I mean it like, I mean it in a very specific fashion, right? We're talking about if you generally look across the globe and look at nations that have ethno-nationalists in power, what you're going to find is a group of ethnic minorities and religious minorities who are not only exploited, but oppressed. And right now, all over the country, all over this planet, we have different versions of ethnic nationalism and different versions of religious nationalism, right? From white supremacy to any other type of supremacy, but specifically from Christian nationalism to Islamic nationalism to Jewish nationalism to Hindu nationalism. We see it happening all over the globe, and those leaders are uniting. Those leaders are uniting around their ability to have global influence outside of democracy, global influence outside of interventions. See what the United States did this week with vetoing the call for a ceasefire is that the United States has given the ethno and religious nationalists around the globe the exact model that's needed to be able to get away with doing anything you want to your minorities in your nation. That's what the United States did. It gave them a model to show this is exactly how you get away with murder. This is the model of how you get away with murder of religious minorities. This is how you get away with the murder of ethnic minorities. This is how you get away with the murder of the LGBTQ community in your nation. You get away with it by having enough political power to push through a veto from one of the major powers. That's it. So long as the United States or somebody on that Security Council has the ability to veto a call for a ceasefire or to veto a call for intervention, then we will continue to see ethnic minorities and religious minorities and marginalized groups all over the globe suffer at the hands of religious nationalism and ethnic nationalism. All right. Let's go to one last quick break before we get out of here. We're going to try one more time to figure out what's going on with this Mike Lee audio, Mike Johnson audio. It did this to me on the podcast yesterday, and it's doing it to us in real time. We've tried to edit it, and it's the wildest thing. I specialize in audio. I've never run into this problem, but that's okay. When we come back, we're going to close out the show with a couple more stories, and maybe we'll find something to lift our spirits, because a lot of stuff that's happening around the globe is really, it should hurt us. Yeah. Right. We should have the space in our heart for the trauma that's happening around the globe. But maybe perhaps we could find a way to find a moment of zen and peace and joy before we get out of here. We'll take it to a quick break. We'll be back with more of the Like It or Not morning show right after this.
Happy Saturday, everybody. Make sure that you stay tuned. We got more coming up next on Like It or Not with Rebecca Azor here on the Benjamin Dixon Show and Power 104.7.
You're locked into Power 104.7. Home of hip.
The thing is with what with these stations, and I absolutely love the station that we're on. What it is, though, is that it's just a reminder that I'm old now, right? These are the stations, the classic R&B and the throwbacks. Like, I'm bopping my head the whole time, and the whole time I'm remembering, wow, this was 20 years ago. This song was 20 years ago, and I didn't have any gray hair. Matter of fact, I had hair on my head. So I appreciate the station. This is my music. This is my era. This is when I was, young and popping. But it just reminds me that I'm no longer that. And we all get older. So in the next few years, those of you who are young, keep in mind, you'll have the same experience. They'll have Ice Spice. She'll be played on the classic R&B and oldies, and, give it a no time flat, maybe 10 years. That said, I want to go back to a very serious topic. I don't know how you ebb and flow between these two extremes, but we're going to do it. And I want to play a clip of my friends from the Majority Report and from the Bituation podcast, Emma Vigeland and Francesca Fiorentini. Best effort I can do, Francesca. I love you. But I want you to hear how they very clearly elucidate the problem that we're facing right now as people of good faith who know genocide when we see it, as opposed to people who normally are on the same side of matters with us. This is the thing about it, is that we're dealing with people who are lockstep with us on every other issue, people who understand the threat of the Republican big lie, people who understand the threat of Vladimir Putin in Ukraine, people who understand they understand all this, but all of a sudden, when they see 10,000 children killed in less than 2 months, they can't see it for what it is. This is what my two friends were speaking of. Let's take a listen into them.
No consequences for now being bad, and we'll just wait till it's over. We'll wait till everyone from Gaza is dead and they're all in the desert or wherever they're supposed to go, and then we'll just be like, God, wasn't that was sad, that was too bad.
Yeah, right. And then we'll call it maybe like a genocide later, not when we could have prevented it. And then let's quibble with the notions of it, even as genocide scholars warn that these are crimes of genocide. Genocide's only a thing that happened before, it's something we can look back on and read in history, as opposed to an ongoing one where we could have prevented it. Right. Then, after the killing is over, we'll call it a genocide. But when we could have stopped it, that's when that word was it's just too inflammatory.
Yeah.
Whew. That's the thing. That's the part. Thank you, Emma and Francesca. We have the opportunity. Every day we allow this to continue on, there are more lives that are lost. I would argue that there is a threshold, a point of no return, where you no longer are up for consideration for anything else but genocide. The United States is riding with Israel on this. To contextualize this a bit more, I want you to remember now that Benjamin Netanyahu is currently on trial, criminal proceedings in Israel for fraud. I think for some a bribe of sorts of about $180,000, somewhere in that, but some cheap amount of money. Like for real, if you're going to be the prime minister of an entire nation, you got to raise your standards and how much you're going to get bribed for. But he's on trial, the third year of his trial for corruption and fraud. The trial was suspended for 2 months. Why, you ask? Because he had a wage war on Hamas, a war that was triggered by October 7th. October 7th, that he was warned about by Egyptian intelligence. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, was warned about October 7th by Egyptian intelligence, but he ignored it. He ignored it. And he consequently was able to get off of trial for 2 months. He wagged the dog as far as he could, and now he's back on trial. And I bring that up because I need people to see that he's more like Vladimir Putin and more like Donald Trump than he is like any of us, right? And the fact that the United States of America has embraced him so wholeheartedly, this regime in particular, because it's not all of the United States of America. It's this particular regime that's full of Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives who have a consensus when it comes to the Palestinian people. They'll let Israel do whatever they want to with that group. And we could have stopped it. And here we are going into the Christmas season. I see people are quibbling over whether or not Jesus was a Palestinian Jew. Bethlehem is currently in the West Bank, people. Let's be realistic. In terms of geographic proximity, the Lord Jesus Christ, who we're getting ready to celebrate, his birthday, it wasn't in December, but we're going to celebrate it, right? Yes, a Palestinian Jew. In terms of geographic region, right now today, Bethlehem is a part of the West Bank. But all of a sudden, we can't see. We number one, going to say that they're doing this in the name of Jesus. Evangelicals are saying they're doing this in Jesus' name, right? Zionists are saying they're doing this in the name of Zionism, right? At the same time, it is an affront to not only faith, but also humanity. And we had an opportunity, like Emma said, we had the opportunity to prevent it, but we are now in the late stages of a full-blown genocide. And I don't know what numbers and thresholds constitute an official, scientifically and methodologically assigned genocide. I don't know what those thresholds are, but I guarantee you we're getting closer. I want to leave with something that is both good news as well as problematic. I want to bring attention to a new drug that has been approved by the FDA, and it's the world's first CRISPR, C-R-I-S-P-R based medicine. And it's for the treatment of sickle cell disease. And anyone who knows anything about sickle cell, is a very debilitating disease, and it predominantly affects African Americans. It affects about 100,000 people in the United States, mostly African Americans. Now, according to the article that I'm reading from, this approval marks a major milestone in biotechnology. Following the initial development of a protein-based drugs in the 1980s, this particular new drug works by editing a patient's own blood stem cells to produce high levels of fetal hemoglobin, and which is normally present during fetal development but diminishes after birth. The treatment mimics a protective genetic mutation and is considered a one-time therapy. Through it, it involves a complex and lengthy process, including a chemotherapy step and a significant side effects. But yet and still, this is one of the most significant progress that we have seen for people suffering with sickle cell. Now, a magnificent scientific advancement, and the FDA has approved it, and we'll see how it works when it hits the market. The problem is the price. And this is the downside of technology on this planet, particularly when it comes to healthcare. We can do some amazing things, but the price tag that we charge people to take this medicine and to go through these procedures for this particular drug and this treatment, it is $2.2 million for one of the parts of the treatment, and then $3.1 million for the other part of the treatment, and all of the demanding treatment processes, the chemotherapy and everything else that's associated with it. So there is an advancement in sickle cell research, a new drug that has been put on the market, giving life extending options to people who have struggled with sickle cell. But the price tag really points to us, to the reality that medicine on this planet, when it's tied to the profit motive, it can be as magnificent as what they're doing, editing the blood cells treating sickle cell anemia right at the source with life-altering and life-extending medication that's on the cutting edge of technology. We can do those things only if you can afford it. Listen, that's all the time we have for today. I want to give a shout out again to my homeboy, DJ Exclusives. It's his birthday weekend. Show him some love. Cash App, DJ X3C. Show him some love. As well as Rebecca Azor, Cash App. I don't want to say that's the song. It's in one of the notes. Hang on, David. She's going to kill me. What is Rebecca's Cash App? And we lost my battery, but that's fine. We're going to get out of here. Be kind to somebody. Speak truth to power, but most importantly, don't let them tell you to not believe your own eyes. You see what's going on. Your heart knows what's going on. And to that end, speak power to truth and truth to power about what's going on. We'll